be open to knowing that there's maybe something you aren't quite aware of.
Right, and no two people know that better than the white guy and the white lady who are teaching on diversity and inclusion, right?
Yeah.
We don't claim to be experts. What we claim to be is just another one beggar leading another beggar to food. Maybe a little bit of a guide on the journey because we've got kind of the map, but that doesn't necessarily mean we've ever been there before. I'll just give you one example from my personal history quickly. When I was first leading businesses, when it was time to gather a meeting, I would frequently find myself saying, "Come on, everybody, let's have a powwow." Just think about that for a second. I'll let that settle. It's not because I thought I was an insensitive person. It's because I did not know better. And the very day it was pointed out to me that that was not just a turn of phrase, as I had been brought up with, but was really actually very culturally insensitive, tone deaf, and appropriating another culture, and taking a very sacred native meeting space and just using it as a throwaway word for let's get together and talk about whatever problem we're having, uh, was very insensitive and offensive to some. And the day that I heard that was the day I decided I didn't want to use that word anymore. I'd like to say that that means I just went, I'm done with that word, but that's not the way change really works. It took me, I don't know, probably another year, maybe even 2 years of working with it. But once I had the awareness, which is the key piece, you have to know it before you can be it. And once I had the awareness, every time I heard myself uttering the phrase after that, I could stop and go, you know what, I didn't mean that. Let me throw that away. I need another word. And so I could start replacing and changing that habit. So that's what we're going to get in today is, can you know your role and can you be comfortable and accept your role, knowing that your role doesn't have to be perfect or even good or the best or right or whatever word you want to put at it, just has to be real. Can you accept where you're starting and move from there? So let us take you through now this model, this PCIHO model. And really each letter just stands for one of the 5 roles that everybody in an organization plays to some extent. The first role is the pioneer. There typically is only one pioneer. Sometimes there can be a couple. This is the person who really brings forth an issue for the first time or really with an intensity in an organization. Then we have champions who tend to support the pioneer in bringing forth that mission, and influencers who, once they are aware of what's going on, want to spread the word to the rooftops. And then at the bottom, there are hesitators who aren't quite sure whether or not this is the time to talk about that and would rather be a little bit safe. And also obstructors who don't think this is an issue worth even getting into. So what does that mean? Let's break that down. We put together a handy chart. So when we talk about the pioneer, the champion, the influencer, the hesitator, and the obstructor, the best way to start to identify your role is to know what your purpose is for your role, what your motivations are, how you identify what type of self-talk you tell yourself and what your behaviors look like to line up with that. And then finally, you can ask yourself, what sort of change-driven actions can I take and can I do? So first, let's talk about purpose. The pioneer sees their purpose as to create and cast a vision for change. Like I said, they're the first one in. So they're the one that comes in and says, you know, we have to do something about X, Y, or Z. For our purposes, we're talking about diversity and inclusion. So we have to do something because there is an issue that doesn't line up with how diversity and inclusion could really be played out. A champion will support then that vision and support that plan for change. So the champions will say, you're right, you're absolutely right, let's get going. We're with you, let's get this done. Influencers want to carry that message. They want to light other candles, spread everything to the community. Then once they hear about it, influencers tend to be the, hey, let's let everybody know, shout it from the rooftops, let's get this out there. Hesitators right on the other edge of that, they just want to wait and see and maybe watch from a distance and be like, well, okay, I see that this is an issue, but I want to see how this all plays out. I should note before I go on that most people in an organization tend to identify as an influencer or a hesitator. You have usually one pioneer, a few or a couple champions, and a few maybe or a couple obstructors. And obstructors, their purpose really is just to be obstructive to change for reasons we'll get into in a moment here.
With that being said, there's always a reason why we choose to be in one of the roles that Ben just reviewed. So a motivator for a pioneer is because you are inspired to bring out the best in anything that you're very passionate about. For a champion, you are you're just motivated and inspired to be on a winning team, you're a team player. You'll do whatever it is to support the pioneer. An influencer, there are people who want to bring it forward. They're people of action. They're likely to spread the word, talk to other people about what's going on. A hesitator is really wanting to keep the status quo. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to make anybody right or wrong. And an obstructor, for whatever reason, they're probably fearing some kind of change, and they may not be clear about it, or maybe they're afraid of being right or wrong.
That's right. And one way that's easy to help people figure out what's what is you can ask people kind of how they identify. A pioneer is going to identify themselves as empowered. They're going to feel like they have the ability and maybe even the mantle or the commanded decision to make change. Champions are going to feel themselves as supportive. They're going to identify as supportive. If you ask a champion, do you support diversity inclusion? They're going to say, absolutely. That's a good way to know you're in the room with a champion. Influencers tend to identify as enthusiastic, which makes sense with the first two columns, right? If they're trying to shout from the rooftops, you can't shout from the rooftops and not care. Hesitators identify themselves as responsible. What's important to know about hesitators is it's not that they're anti diversity and inclusion, but they see that there's also this other responsibility that needs to be balanced. Obstructors tend to identify themselves as right. So they have a point of view or a set of rules they're playing by that leads them to the conclusion that there needs to be some resistance to these ideas. And of course, if you identify as right, then everybody else is wrong.
So if you're a pioneer, you're likely demonstrating the behavior or talking to yourself in a way that you're identifying what is wrong and what can I actually do to move this forward in the right way. A champion is all behind asking a pioneer or anybody around them, what can I do to help? How can I add value? I'm all in. Let me know and I'll do it. An influencer is how can I spread the word? How can I get others to join in? They want to be out with the megaphone announcing this great news to everybody. A hesitator may be thinking, is this right and safe for us? Let me just hesitate for a moment, check it out, and then I'll go forward. And an obstructor will likely have the self-talk of this probably won't work. I could be doing other things right now. This is likely a waste of my time, and I don't see a problem with this.
Right, and sometimes not even a waste of my time, but they might feel it's a waste of the company's resources.
True.
Right, maybe this is the 5th diversity and inclusion program they've sat through when their projects are sitting on the table, and that's a really valid concern for that needs to be addressed at the table and brought forward and talked about. So what do we do and how do we engage with the topic? Well, a pioneer is going to need to clarify their vision. Sometimes, I would say actually oftentimes, a pioneer will get out ahead of the charge before there's really a structure formed, and they'll be saying, this is wrong, we have to move, but they won't be able to clearly articulate what do we need to move towards and how. So your job is, if you identify as a pioneer, is clarify your vision and make a safe space for everybody to join and come with you. Nobody wants to be the jerk in the room, right? Nobody wants to be the anti-progress. But if they don't feel safe, there's no way that they'll be able to buy in and come along and connect with you. Champions, your job is to bring structure and organization. So make it as inclusive as possible. That's where the inclusion part of diversity inclusion comes in. If there's an issue on the table, get everybody to the table and make sure that you help celebrate every step forward, no matter how incremental or small. A win is a win. I often say to people when we're coaching one-on-one, they'll tell me how they've accomplished whatever goals we set out, and then they'll equivocate and say, yeah, but I did that, really it was this and it was this and it was this and it really wasn't that great. And I'll have to stop them and say, hey, just take the win. Celebrate the victory, because you need that energy when the next struggle comes. Influencers, can you bring your voice alive? Can you spread your influence from the small pocket that you're talking to a much larger pocket? Can you move with intention and purpose? Can you follow the purpose of the pioneer and the champion structure that's led out? There's nothing so great as an influencer who's beating the drum of the team, and there's nothing so bad as the influencer who's wandering around in the parking lot screaming, "Yeah, go us!" Because everybody just looks at that person kind of weird. That's me. Sometimes I get off track that way and just go on complete tangents. So can you come back into alignment with really why is it that you're spreading the word? Hesitators, uh, it's fine to hesitate. You're not wrong for hesitating, but what's one thing you can do? Can you risk getting one thing wrong? You may not want to stick your neck out too far, but can you poke your head out the window and look, for example, to use the metaphor? And obstructors, now, first off, before I get to this one, I want to say, I don't know many people, if any, who actually self-identify as obstructors. We tend to not want to be seen as the one obstructing progress, because nobody wants to be that person. But if you find yourself digging your heels in and being against something, there's probably a good reason, and it doesn't make you wrong. Uh, Especially because obstructors identify as right. So it doesn't make you wrong. Your voice gets to be at the table. That's part of an inclusive process. But the one thing you need to ask yourself before you sit down at the table is, can you be open-minded to the new ideas being presented, even if they're in conflict with your values or your mindset? Can you at least seek some new understanding? If you've got if you remember, the obstructors are one or just a couple out of a whole team. So if the whole rest of the team is really thinking this is a good idea, can you come to the table and say, what am I missing? Because I don't think it's a good idea. So what am I missing? And can somebody shed some light for me about what's going on? Can you declare noble intent? This is very important. I used to have an obstructor on a team that I ran who was sure everybody else was just stupid. He was sure that everybody else was just off in hoity-toity land and nobody wanted to do the work. And that's why we spent so much time in meetings. There was no way to even start to talk with him about the issues at hand because he refused to declare noble intent, which is to say everybody is here because they want something better. So can you be open-minded and seek understanding in the guise that everybody here wants something better, even you? And if you can't be for the idea, that's okay, but can you at least not be against it? Can you at least give the idea space and room to germinate, grow, and flourish? So
That,
that's kind of the top level of the PCIHO model. Yeah, Lynn.
yeah, I was going to just share that Ben and I are teaching this class right now to a company. And when we introduced this model, people, openly expressed that they didn't want to be a certain way. And we experienced a couple people sharing that they went into self-judgment about where their current place in this grid, where they saw themselves. And what was really cool is that they just recognized through our conversation that where you are is exactly where you're supposed to be in order to go someplace else. It may be difficult, but if we accept how we identify with ourselves, then we have a clear pathway forward. So this grid is not by any means meant to have and point people out.
That's a very good point. Whenever we get into something like this, it's very important to remember, whether it's this or if you're familiar with the DISC model and you've ever gone through a DISC assessment and you get that D, the I, the S, or the C label, or the PCIHO label, it's not prescriptive, right? I'm not saying you're an influencer and that's all you're ever going to be. It's descriptive of your current point in time. We're just putting a pin on the board. As you grow and develop, even as soon as tomorrow, you can change where your pin goes. And in fact, one of the most common questions we get is, well, do I have to be all one? I look at that grid and I see myself in a couple different areas. And the answer is no. It's descriptive. It's to give you a sense of what role are you playing. And if your role is mixed because your motivations mix as you go through different areas of life, that's okay. I'll give you just a really quick example before we get into Q&A. In my professional life, I identify as an influencer more than anything. I'm just trying to spread the word. I don't claim to have all the answers. And Lynn doesn't claim to have all the answers, but we know that there's an issue that needs to be talked about. So we're bringing awareness and starting these discussions and facilitating these discussions in as many organizations as will have us. But in my personal life, I am a white guy with a white family and I live in Maplewood. So I basically just go about my life and try to keep my head down. So I'm very much still hesitant in my personal life. And I'm coming to the point where I'm not okay with that anymore. And I would like for that to shift. I'm not ready for it to shift yet, but I'm in the process of shifting it. And I'm in the process of thinking, how can I engage with my local community in a way where I can move into that influencer role, which I believe I'm fairly well equipped for with my background in presenting and things. I think I could be an effective influencer. Can I go to a city council meeting? Ooh, that's scary. Okay, can I go talk to a neighbor? Well, I like two of them. There's two of them I know because we have friends there, and two of them I don't really know, and one of them is across the street and we wave at each other. Maybe I should just go across the street. Oh, that's scary. Well, can I put a lawn sign? No, that's really scary. Right. So I'm going through all these options and I'm trying to figure out from my hesitator spot, what's the one thing I can do? Where can I engage? Because I know once I engage and build some confidence, the bravery will come.
Yeah, that's so
And
true.
by the way, if you like your role, you don't have to change it. You might hear in our presentation, there's this assumption you want to change. And we tend to assume that people like to change and grow. But if you are in a spot, whether that's pioneer, champion, influencer, hesitator, obstructor, whatever, if you're in a spot and you are comfortable in your spot, nobody has the right to force you to change, except for you. So the question is, do you like your spot? Okay, I was going to go through some more frequently asked questions, but I took some time answering that one. And I want to leave time for group questions. So let's open the floor, Christy, to Q&A. And I see we don't have a question in there yet. So I'm going to answer one more frequently asked question. And if you're listening, go ahead and drop a question into the chat or into the Q&A. One more frequently asked question we get about this model is, where should we be? We get that a lot, right? Is it okay to be X, Y, Z? And the short answer is you should be exactly where you are.
Yeah.
Because everything you've done got you to that place, and that's okay. If you're asking where should I be, that's probably an indicator you know you don't really like where you are, and then you should be wherever you think you want to be. So this is meant to be a safe space discussion. And in fact, even though this is only 20 minutes, this particular piece we talk about can sometimes take an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hours when we're teaching it with a group of people, because I think you can see all of the questions and discussion that could break out of just this one model. I see we have a question, Christy.
We do, and it's a good one. So the question is, in the pioneer action step, how do you make people feel safe to join you?
That's a great question. You want to take that one, Lynn?
Well, I'll take one perspective of it, Ben. So to me, I hear the question, how do you bring diversity, well, not bring, but how do you attract diversity and inclusion into your organization? Because as a pioneer, that's probably what if you're passionate about this, you're going to, try to figure out how to do that. So it's trickle down. As a pioneer, you have to be it and create a platform of safety where there's conversations that are open to all staff in a way that everybody, like this grid, you accept everybody where they're at. So as a leader, you have to bring the material in to raise the awareness. And people are going to feel safe sometimes. And even if you create an environment of safety, some people are still going to have fears. So you can't control everything. But as a pioneer, you got to bring it forward and make it part of the culture, integrate it into your other trainings, your activities, and speak about it.
Right, and I think it's different depending on what your structural role in an organization is. Right, everybody can be a leader, but not everybody gets to be the boss. So if you happen to be the boss, you have a leg up because leadership trickles down from the top. And if you can set the tone, because as a manager or a boss, you have the power in a company to call out employees who are not acknowledging the safe space and say that's no longer going to fly. That's out of bounds for our company. And I'm just using general language. You have your own company language for how you talk about it, right? If you're not, if you have a position of a line worker or a floor staff, or even a low-level manager who doesn't have that sort of authority, the very first thing you need to do before making the safe space for your group is make sure you've got permission and buy-in from your top leaders to make that safe space. So that's where the conversation starts for culture change. It always comes from the top.
And another thing that I do, again, I am a director of a nonprofit, and what we do to make a safe space is when an issue comes up, I'll take gossiping, for example. We were creating a culture of no gossip. And what we did is when it occurred, myself and my senior director would have a very open conversation one-on-one with the person, and we would actually explain and raise their awareness of what gossip was. In this case, what is diversity, or what was the issue actually expressing, okay? And then it was safe because it stayed in that room, and we made a culture of it's okay to be where you're at. So you're not going to get punished, you're not going to get written up, this isn't a strike against you. This is hopefully that when it's brought to your awareness, you'll have some time to think about it and decide if you want to change.
Right.
Well, I think you may have addressed the second question, but I'm going to read it anyways in case you want to add anything else to it. In a top-down organization, who should be a pioneer or an influencer versus who can be a pioneer or an influencer?
The short answer is yes. The pioneers are cause-driven people. Champions and influencers are champions tend to be cause-driven people. Influencers, their motivations about why they're an influencer mix around. Like we said earlier, most people will fall into the influencing or hesitating camp. If you're a pioneer about a particular topic, if you feel strongly that there is something wrong, or not even wrong, that's probably too strong a word, but just off, or that needs improvement or change about diversity and inclusion in your company, you're not going to care where your position is. You're going to feel compelled to speak out. If you don't feel compelled to speak out, you may not see yourself as the pioneer role. You may see yourself as the influencer role and want to line up behind a pioneer. But if you feel compelled to speak out, you will. If you happen to be in top-level leadership, great. If not, go talk to top-level leadership. That's where it starts.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see more questions, so I'm going to keep that one short.
Yeah, so this is a great one. What are some resources for people who want to bring a conversation to the leadership in a company?
That's a great question. There's us, of course, in the interest of shameless self-promotion. And before you're thinking that's a buy my stuff thing, it's not. If you feel reticent or nervous, if there's maybe some inertia or resistance in your top level leadership, we'll come and talk to them. We won't charge you for it. We'll come and we're just trying to bring the conversation. So if you'd like some backup and support, get some other people on your side. Other good resources would be, there's a group called the Empowered Living Community, and their website is youремpoweredlife.com. Back me up, Lynn.
Youремpowered
life. Well, that one's old, so I think it's youремpoweredlife.com. And they're our source for where we got exposed to another seat at the table. So you can ask them some questions as well and bring them to play. Those would be my two best resources. Usually this is where I talk about books, but I can't think of a good book that would really equip you to have a powerful conversation. Get some people on your side. If you've got people in your company, that's best. If not, reach out to people like us to kind of help guide and mentor and just cheerlead for you so you've got support.
And I'd like to just add in, there's a couple different ways that you may want to approach this topic too, because the way we approach it is bringing teams or people together to have open conversations, a brief background on what we're talking about, but then it's the group that get together and share and bond and understand from different perspectives. And that really is the biggest catalyst for change. And just to correct, I got the correct website for it's youремpowered.life.
Perfect. So I think that answers my question. I think for those that are on the webinar today that may not be the owner of their company and maybe looking to talk to leadership about this, if they find that their leadership is more in the hesitator or obstructor role, it's best, it sounds like, to talk to their employees who may be able to come together in either the influencer or the pioneer or any of those roles and have that conversation first and then bring it to leadership.
Right. And, I just sparked to mind, if you, I'm assuming this question is based on there is some hesitation or maybe even some obstruction from top leadership. If that's not the case, you have an easy road, just go start talking. If it is the case, here's some statistics that might help, which are absolutely vitally true about why we're talking about this. Above and beyond everything that's happened in 2020 and all the stuff we're seeing in the media, even above and beyond all that, which is enough impetus to start. Here are some statistics that are estimations of what's coming. It's estimated that in the next 4 to 5 years, 75% of the workplace will be made up of the millennial generation. And if there's one thing that you can say generally about the millennial generation, and there's not much you can say generally about the millennial generation, but if there's one thing you can say generally about the millennial generation, they are cause-driven people.
Yeah.
As a whole, and they absolutely care about this topic. So if you are a top-level leader on this webinar, or if you're going to go and talk to top-level leadership, there is a strong business argument to be made for why this is going to be good for your bottom line. You don't want to alienate 75% of your incoming workforce if you still want to be in business 5 years from now.
Yeah.
So that might be a statistic that you can help. Don't say it just like I said it, soften it. Before you're not going to get far if you go to your leaders and go, you don't want this. But, that could help.
Absolutely. Well, this went fast as it did last time, but we are at 8:30. And I want to thank both of you for packaging this model, which I know typically you roll out in a couple 4-hour sessions and trying to provide as much valuable information to our members as possible in 20 minutes. And I think you did an excellent job. I do want to let participants know that you have provided a handbook that is a deeper dive into this model that we'll be emailing out along with your contact information. So if any questions were not answered today, please reach out to Ben and Lynn. And if you are interested in bringing a training like this to your organization or to your leadership, please check out Unconditional Living.
Thank you very much, Christy.
Thank you, Christy. Thanks, everybody.
Yes. And stay warm. Our next webinar is next Wednesday, October 28th. And again, this is the Real-Time Solution webinar brought to you in partnership between the Apple Valley, Burnsville, Hastings, Lakeville River Heights Chamber of Commerce. And we want to say a special thank you to our sponsor, Comcast, and an extra special thank you to Unconditional Living and Lynn and Ben today. So have an excellent Wednesday, everyone.
Bye. Take care.
Take care.